Hello, my name is Robert McClellan, and I'm an Associate Professor of Geography at Wilfrid Laurier University. And this video is a short introduction for students in ES101 to the fourth of 5 labs for the course. And in this lab, we talk about what happens when the interests that we have in protecting the natural environment conflict with our interest in having a vibrant economy. I'm on the banks of Laurel Creek here in Waterloo, Ontario. Now, this is a relatively healthy urban creek. Before Europeans settled in this area, it would have been not just the creek where I'm now standing, but it would have been an area of wetlands as well. And these wetlands would have supported a large range of species that we would today find on the Species at Risk Act. Things like a number of turtle species, for example. And in this lab, we actually talk about one of those, the Blanding's turtle. Now, you can't really see it in this picture, but just off camera to my right, there's a large community center and swimming pool that have been built here. In the background, there's a large apartment complex that's very close to the shore. There's some houses upslope that way. And then farther upstream from here, there's a big shopping mall that comes right up to the edge of the creek at the back end of it, where the trucks come in and where the dumpsters are, and all that kind of stuff that we kind of hide from public view. Now, it doesn't mean to say that the creek is entirely unhealthy or that there isn't a lot of biodiversity in it. There's some mallard ducks just off camera to my left. I've seen sport fish in the creek here. I haven't seen any turtles, but I suspect they're here. Now, let's talk about turtles a little bit more. Most Ontario turtles, not all, but most of them appear on either the Species at Risk Act, which is a federal piece of legislation that protects species that are at risk, or on the provincial Endangered Species Act list. And so if you were to find a turtle around here that's on that list, like the Blanding's turtle, snapping turtles, eastern musk turtles, painted turtles, you would not be allowed to harm that turtle. You're also, under that legislation, not allowed to disturb the habitat of those turtles. Now, the reality is that, in this part of Waterloo at least, that habitat has long been disturbed. For more than a century now, we've been disturbing that habitat. Now, there's probably still some of those turtles living in this area, but there's not much we can do about that now. The arena, the apartment building, the houses, they're already here. The question and where we get into conflict with the Species at Risk Act or the Endangered Species Act often happens when we're doing new developments on the outskirts of Waterloo, for example, where, say, a developer wants to build a new subdivision and there's some wetlands in there, and lo and behold, we discover that those wetlands hold Blanding's turtles or eastern musk turtles, for example. What happens then? Well, it becomes a balancing act, doesn't it? Because we want to maintain the interest of providing housing and economic development for the region, but at the same time, we are required by law to protect that habitat. So, although the law may say you may not disturb it at all, we often end up in these situations where we try to find compromises to balance the two. And so that's really the aim of this lab assignment, is to start thinking about environmental issues. And we talk about Blanding's turtles in the lab, and I think that most of us would agree that it's important that we protect these species. But then we start to think about, well, what happens when we start to consider other implications of when a Blanding's turtle is sighted. And then the next part of the lab assignment, what you're going to do with your lab instructor, is to talk about spotted owls. Now, the northern spotted owl also appears on the Species at Risk Act list of protected species in Canada. And during the 1990s, it was the subject of some very significant conflicts in Western Canada and in the Western United States as well, between people who wanted to prevent the logging of old-growth forests and people who wanted to work in the timber industry and develop those forests to harvest those trees. And it's quite important because the northern spotted owl is a species that thrives best in old-growth forests. And it was very controversial. It was headline news 20 years ago, ended up in the courts. And so what you're going to do is to look at that controversy and then do a little bit of an update to find out what has happened with spotted owl populations here in North America, and also to suggest what you would do if you were a judge who had to decide between the interests of loggers and those who would protect the forest. So that's a brief video intro to this lab. I hope you have fun with it, and I'll see you in class next week.